Released in 1992, American Me is often called the Godfather of Latino cinema. It tells the story of the rise of the Mexican Mafia through the eyes of Montoya Santana and his right-hand man, JD. But if you think this was just a fictional drama, think again. Edward James Olmos didn't just write a story. He basically remixed the biographies of the most dangerous men in California history. Santana is a stand-in for the philosophical founder Cheyenne Cadena. JD is the legendary Joe Pegleg Morgan. But how accurate was the movie? Did the real Santana actually get taken out by his own men? The truth is actually way crazier and way more litigious than the movie. So today, we are going to fact-check the prison records against the screenplay to see how the movie characters stack up against the real-life gangsters. So, let's check it out. Montoya Santana versus Rodolfo Cheyenne Cadena. In the film, Edward James Olmos plays Montoya Santana, the charismatic visionary who builds La M.A. from a street clique into a prison empire. Santana is imprisoned for a gang-related crime, survives a brutal sexual assault in prison, and murders his attacker. From that moment forward, his sentence is extended, but his legend begins. He rises through the ranks, becomes untouchable, and eventually leads the most powerful criminal organization California has ever seen. By the film's end, Santana attempts to escape this life and pursue legitimacy. His own men see this as weakness and betrayal. They stab him repeatedly and throw him off a balcony. Now, the real Montoya Santana is Rodolfo Alvarado Cheyenne Cadena. Cadena was born April 15, 1943, and genuinely became an architect of the Mexican Mafia. He was incarcerated at Duell Vocational Institution in Tracy, California, after he and Richard Ruiz stabbed a man to death outside Salon Juarez in East Los Angeles in 1959. He was only 16 years old. While inside, Cadena did gain enormous respect and became a core founding figure of La M during its formative years. He and Joe Pegleg Morgan became best friends and together established the gang as the most powerful criminal organization in the California correctional system. But here's where the movie completely diverges from reality. In the film, Santana is killed by his own organization because he tries to leave gang life. The Mexican Mafia, according to the movie's logic, cannot tolerate members who seek redemption or escape. It's portrayed as an iron law of the organization. In real life, completely different story. On December 17, 1972, Rodolfo Cadena was in a prison cell in Palm Hall at the Chino Reception Center when he was attacked, not by his own gang, but by members of Nuestra Familia, La M's primary rival. He was stabbed an estimated 50 times with prison shanks and beaten with a pipe. He was then thrown off a third-story tier onto the concrete floor below and stabbed approximately a dozen more times. He died from these injuries. The real reason? According to federal court documents and gang historians, Cadena had been attempting to broker peace between La M and Nuestra Familia. He was trying to unite the two most powerful prison gangs in California. This was seen as a catastrophic betrayal by other La M leaders, particularly Joe Morgan. Morgan viewed a truce as a threat to his power, so Morgan orchestrated the execution of two Nuestra Familia leaders. Cadena was left exposed. Nuestra Familia took their revenge, so the movie got the brutal stabbing right. It got the fall from height right. It got the death right. But it got the motive completely wrong. Cadena wasn't trying to escape gang life. He was trying to unite it. And he paid for his ambition with his life. JD versus Joe Pegleg Morgan. William Forsythe plays JD in the film, a white guy with a prosthetic leg who somehow becomes a top lieutenant in a predominantly Hispanic gang. He's volatile, impulsive, quick to anger, and frequently pushes Santana to take more aggressive action. He's also deeply loyal, but by the end of the film, JD ends up ordering the execution of Santana because he begins to show weakness. This character is based on Joseph Pegleg Morgan, and this is where the accuracy gets genuinely fascinating. Joseph Morgan was born Joseph Medjugorje on April 10, 1929. He was Croatian-American, not white in any conventional gang sense, though he certainly wasn't Mexican. He grew up in a primarily Mexican and Croatian neighborhood in San Pedro, and later was raised by his mother in a Mexican neighborhood in Boyle Heights. He became fluent in Spanish and joined the Ford Maravilla Street Gang in the late 1930s, one of the oldest documented gangs in Los Angeles history. The prosthetic leg? That's real. Morgan had an artificial leg, which is why he got the nickname Pegleg. Here's the critical accuracy. Morgan did become the first non-Mexican-American member of the Mexican Mafia, which is genuinely remarkable. Despite having no official Mexican blood, despite being a Croatian outsider, he rose to become one of the highest-ranking bosses of the entire organization by the mid to late 1970s. He had legitimate connections with cocaine and heroin suppliers in Mexico, which helped establish La M's narcotics distribution network throughout California. In 1971, Morgan committed what law enforcement describes as the first ever prison gang street execution ordered from behind bars, a killing that established La M's reach beyond prison walls and proved they could execute people on the outside. But here's where the film fundamentally misunderstands who Joe Morgan was. The film portrays JD as erratic and impulsive, constantly at odds with Santana, pushing for violence, always wanting to escalate, passionate but unstable. In reality, Joe Morgan was a calculating businessman who operated with surgical precision. He wasn't impulsive, he was strategic. He understood negotiations, supply chains, and power dynamics in a way that transcended street-level aggression. Morgan was a CEO in a criminal organization. He saw La M as a business enterprise, not just a gang. The movie turned him into a hothead. The reality was far colder and far more intelligent. And here's what the film completely sidesteps. Joe Pegleg Morgan survived the making of American Me. Unlike Rodolfo Cadena, Morgan was alive when the film came out, and he was furious. He sued Edward James Olmos and Universal Studios for portraying him without permission. Morgan claimed he was defamed by being depicted as volatile and reckless. He wanted legal compensation, but Morgan never got his day in court. He died shortly after filing the suit, from inoperable liver cancer in November 1993. He never won. He never lost. He just died. The lawsuit died with him. Mundo versus Ramon Machine Gun Mundo Mendoza. In the film, Mundo is Montoya Santana's childhood friend who follows him into La M. He's portrayed as steady, capable, and implicitly involved in the organization's violence without being flashy about it. He ends up executing Santana with his fellow gang members from the order of JD. The real Mundo is Ramon Machine Gun Mundo Mendoza, and his story is shockingly different. Mendoza went from being a Catholic altar boy to one of the most violent hitmen in Mexican Mafia history. He's admitted to at least 9 homicides. He was so effective at his work that he earned the nickname Machine Gun Mundo, a nickname he apparently wore with pride. His crew included some of the most notorious Mexican Mafia members of the era: Robot Salas, Shotgun Sanchez, Big Mike Mulhern, and Joe Pegleg Morgan himself, who sponsored Mundo into La M. Here's where the film captures something true. In the movie, Mundo remains loyal to the organization. He doesn't question, he executes. But the film couldn't have predicted what happened next. The real Ramon Mendoza eventually defected. After decades in the gang, after murdering people for La M, after rising through the ranks, Mendoza experienced a religious awakening. He decided to leave the organization. This was incredibly dangerous. La M doesn't accept resignations. Leaving the gang is a death sentence. But Mendoza went even further. He became an undercover informant for federal authorities. He flipped. He became a cooperating witness. He's now under witness protection because he helped put over 30 fellow Mexican Mafia members behind bars. The loyal soldier became the organization's greatest enemy. The film captured Mundo's role as a killing machine, but it could never have imagined that the real Mundo would eventually wear a wire and destroy the organization he served. El Japo versus Michael Jap Kudo. One of the most unusual elements of American Me is the character El Japo, a Japanese-American member of the Mexican Mafia played by actor Cary Hiroyuki Tagawa. His presence in a primarily Hispanic gang raises immediate questions that the film never really answers. How did this happen? Why would the gang accept him? What does his membership say about La M's structure? The answer lies with a real person, Michael Jap Kudo. Michael Kudo was a Japanese-American who wanted membership in the Mexican Mafia so badly that he forced his way in. He was from Hawaii originally, and his criminal record includes charges for rape in Honolulu in 1963, crimes that would have typically made him persona non grata in an organized gang structure. But Kudo was persistent and connected to the right people. Somehow, he got in. Here's what's remarkable. Kudo didn't just join La M, he became influential. He's credited with introducing Samurai Bushido Code and the book The Art of War to the Mexican Mafia. He influenced the gang's philosophy and their approach to warfare and strategy. This was genuinely significant. Kudo showed that membership in La M wasn't rigidly bound to ethnicity, but rather to capability, loyalty, and bringing something valuable to the organization. Kudo was paroled to Hawaii in 1972 and eventually managed to escape back to the islands. While there, he continued facilitating La M drug operations, specifically running heroin and methamphetamine from the mainland to Hawaii. So the film was accurate in showing El Japo as an outsider who somehow earned his place in the hierarchy, but it undersold his actual impact. Kudo wasn't just a token member, he was a strategic thinker. The movie turned him into a curiosity. The reality was far more complex. Conclusion. So, did the movie get it right? American Me captures certain structural truths about the Mexican Mafia. It shows how prison can transform desperate young people into hardened criminals. It demonstrates how organizations like La M maintain control through violence, loyalty, and an impenetrable code. It illustrates why people can't simply leave these organizations. But it also distorts, simplifies, and invents key details. Montoya Santana's death, while brutal like Cadena's, happened for completely different reasons. JD is portrayed as more volatile than the calculating Joe Morgan ever was. Mundo's eventual defection and federal cooperation could never have been predicted by the film's narrative. El Japo is presented as a curiosity rather than a strategic philosopher who shaped La M's ideology. The film succeeded as drama. As documentary, it was selective, and as social commentary, it had tragic, real-world consequences that Edward James Olmos may or may not have foreseen.